Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Lampi Loves Meta, and hell yeah I do. Last weekend we had the 250th YCS on 3 different continents, London, Bogota and Los Angeles, giving us a bunch of data to look at and also a bunch of decks that were very creative. So as you can already see on the screen, we are going to look into the meta game of London first of all. But before that, make sure to drop a like to this video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the content. I would really appreciate that. So, London, Kashtira 41% in top 64, and quite honestly, that is a big number that I did not expect to be that high. That is almost 50%, so almost 50%, almost half of top cut was Kashtira, and I thought that Kashtira will be the best and most represented deck. But I didn't expect it to be by that big of a margin, so that really caught me by surprise. I thought that the Spright deck and also Mathmech and Runick, which we see only had 6% right here, right there in representation, would be a lot closer, and that competition would be a little bit more collected and together. And when we went deeper into the tournament, we saw that Kashtira got less and less, and we had really interesting decks competing against Kashtira, and even the Spright deck winning the whole event with Samir Bakar taking down the event. But yeah, let's see. I think, as we said, Spright, shoutouts to Dinkang Pham once again. He has invented the Melfi Spright version once again for this format. Many people were on it, many people were successful with it, as we can see. Then Runick. I think this is like the biggest surprise box, because we are going to look at a couple of lists having the Runick engine in it, and those are really crazy. And I think the Runick decks are probably moving forward going to be the decks that are going to influence the format the most. I think you're going to have to build your deck to beat the Runick decks, quite honestly. And then we see Rika was in there as well, and a couple of others too, obviously. But we are going to look at some lists now. I don't have a breakdown for Los Angeles or Bogota, but we have a bunch of lists for those events, so let's get into this right away. First of all, I want to start with something more or less standard, which is a Kashtira list that got top 16 at YCS Los Angeles, and it is by Patrick Hoban. And I think that's a good starting point, because Patrick Hoban, veteran of the game, knows what he does, so definitely worth checking out his list. It is not too crazy though. We see a really big amount of hand traps, so this is considered to be hand trap Kashtira with Ghost Mourner, Veiler, Ash, Imperm, and all that kind of stuff. And then he decided to play Book of Moon over Book of Eclipse. He wanted to have another book though, so he also played one Book of Eclipse in the main deck. And then I think the side deck is where we see that Kurikara really picked up in popularity over the last week and a half, over the last YCS weekend. A lot of top players were on Kurikara, and I was praising Kaijus to be a solution for the combo zone lock endboard of Kashtira, but also for the Arise Pass variant. And Kurikara does the same. Probably it's just a little bit better because it is a big body on your side of the field, and it also can clear like multiple monsters, as I just mentioned. So I think Kurikara, rightfully so, right now being very well represented in side decks and even in some main decks, as we are about to see as well. Overall, Kashtira, the most represented deck, also winning YCS Los Angeles, but going from something pretty standard into something absolutely insane. This is the deck that played in our round 7 featured match at YCS London, piloted by Callum. And yeah, it is a 60 card warrior pile deck with a Goki engine in it, or like the biggest part of it is Goki, and then also a couple of Phantom Knight cards. And I mean, we had so much fun casting this deck specifically. It did actually end up winning the featured match, but he missed out by 1 point to qualify into day 2. But still, that shows us that creative deck building is really possible in the current meta game. You just gotta have a couple of solutions for the Kashtira matchup, and I think if you are main decking Nibiru, if you are main decking Ashes and evenly matches, you are probably going to be fine versus that deck, and you're probably going to be fine versus most of the decks, I would say. And therefore I think you can just play whatever you like if you can find the space for a couple of non-engine cards in there as well. And I mean, his side deck is really getting his go second cards up even further. Of course, you would like to win the dice roll with that, but after siding, you're okay with having more like Kaijus, Gammas. Gamma also is a card that has increased in popularity a lot. I saw a lot of Gammas all around, But the next deck we have right here is the second place finisher Jesse Flores of YCS Los Angeles, and he brought Naturia Runick, and this is quite interesting. I said we are going to talk about the Runick strategies a bunch, because there's many to look at, and Naturia Runick was so much more popular over in the US than in Europe. I think in Europe, a lot of the top players actually switched away from this Runick variant and went to another one. We're going to look at a couple of lists and I will show you what the Europeans were playing in terms of Runick. And in America, a lot of them were actually still on the Naturia Runick deck, which is by no means bad. And we see the Kurikara in the main and another one in side deck, and then Kaiju's in the main deck as well, which I think is pretty interesting. Evenly more and more becoming a staple in at least the side deck, but in a lot of main decks as well, so that's quite interesting to see. There's no Moon in the side deck, no Moon in the extra deck, but he is siding it. And also this card here, picking up in popularity a lot. Dark Ruler No More is not only good versus the Spright deck that is getting more and more popular, but also good versus all the Naturia Runick decks, for example, because if they go for Naturia Beast Pass and you do have Dark Ruler No More, that helps you if you're playing a deck with a lot of spell cards, because otherwise you are not playing at all, and Dark Ruler is just a pretty good card, which at the beginning of the format, when everyone was only expecting Kashtira, was not played at all because that card is not denying the zone lock. But now that there are more other decks in the format, I think Dark Ruler No More could really well be a staple in the side decks again moving forward. Next deck on the list is the top 64 list from YCS London by Chantari, and it was the only Traptrix deck that topped the whole event. And it's not just the regular Traptrix deck with only a couple of moves in the first turn. This is combo Traptrix with the Furion cards. We see here Lily Borea, Regulus, and also the Rika Princess, which makes you Nibiru proof, which is kind of cool as well. And yeah, we are going for more. Our end board is better in that case, and we of course are just creating a bigger board, which is way harder to break. I feel like regular Traptrix right now is just not strong enough. It doesn't set up big enough of a board that can withstand the other decks. I feel like regular Traptrix versus Runick, for example, is just so easy to play through, so you are just putting up more cards to the board, so a Runick deck has more problems to play through it, and therefore I do understand that we are going with the combo approach. He went out in top 64, which was a little bit unfortunate, but still a very good accomplishment by him, and I'm very excited to see how Traptrix is going to perform in the upcoming weeks. But what do we have next? We have the 45 card Rika deck by Jessica Robertson, I'm sorry. Yeah, top 64, and she was not the only one. She had Alex Robertson and another British colleague bringing the deck to the YCS and making top 64 with it. And yeah, it's Rika. What can I tell you? This deck is scary. I never like playing against it. You never really know what's coming from them, because I had an interview with Alex Robertson and still no one really hand traps this deck efficiently. And then in the deck profile, Jessica actually mentioned, don't Ash the Link 1, Ash the Sowing. And then Alex was like, no, don't tell them, but now the info is out. Just try to Ash the Sowing instead of the Link 1. At the beginning, everyone tried to Ash the Link 1, but that's not how you do it anymore. Still, this deck can very well play through one Ash, I can tell you that. And the side deck is, of course, also really interesting, because this is a searchable, scalable MST there, the Predator plant, and I think all in all, this deck is still a really good contender, and I think more and more people should actually be aware of this. More and more people should probably try to test this out a little bit, because this is really impressive and strong. And then I told you we are looking at more Runick variants, and this was the talk of the town. This was the deck that everybody in London was talking about, because all of a sudden, all of the top players, including Joshua Schmidt, and this is the Joshua Schmidt list from top 32, were on Live Twin Runick Spright, and they were really sure that this is the best deck of the format. I talked to Vincenzo Rufino, who made top 16 with this deck. He was like, yep, I was very, very sure that this was the best deck of the format. None of them came further than top 16, which makes me question whether it is the best deck of the format. But we see some very nice decks. They are playing Kurikara in the main deck, evenly matched as well. And the main interaction on the end board is that we're going to end on IP Masquerina, and we're going to summon out Nightmare Griffin in our middle main monster zone, so our opponent can just not use monster effects because none of their monsters is going to be linked. So I really like that because we can take care of so many things with the Runick engine, and then we have that Floodgate monster with Nightmare Griffin as well. I think it is actually a really strong deck, but let me know in the comments whether you think it is the best deck of the format, because that was the opinion that a lot of top players had for that event. As I said, this is Joshua Schmidt's list. He definitely had a good run with getting top 32, but maybe in the future this deck is way more dominant. And then, of course, the man, the myth, the legend, Dinkabui making top 4 with another Runick Spright variant, but with Spice, of course, as it is the Fur Hire package as well. And yeah, what can I tell you? The main thing about this deck is that Folgo is going to trigger a bunch, and Folgo, when there's a card being destroyed on the opponent's side of the field, which usually will be through Donpa, who can just destroy opponent's cards when you are summoning out Fur Hire cards, then you can draw 3 cards if you are controlling 2 more Fur Hire monsters. And yeah, a draw 3 combined with another draw 3 card in your main deck, which is Runick Fountain, sounds pretty good. Worked out pretty well for him. I think it was a big upside for him that, again, nobody really knew what the Fur Hire cards were doing, so they were prepared for the Runick part. They were, of course, prepared for the Spright part, which is pretty small in this. We see only 1 starter, for example, in this deck, and also only 1 Spright Jet and all that kind of stuff. So the Spright part really is only the ceiling and the top off of the thing. But yeah, once again, the deck builder himself, Dinkabui, managed to, again, get this out of his hat, went all the way into top 4, finished 4th place, really, really big accomplishment. And also this card got more and more popular in the side deck of a lot of players. This is Grave of the Super Ancient Organism, and this card going first and going second is just really strong versus Despia, because what is Despia going to do if you just flip that up going second when it's their turn again? They need to, like, they don't really have answers to this, so they Gimmick Puppet lock you, you give it back to them, you have the Super Ancient Organism, you're probably just fine, and you're just probably going to grind that game out anyway. So yeah, Despia not seeing a whole lot of success this weekend, and that is another reason why that was the case. But those were all the lists that I wanted to show you. I am very excited about the current meta game. I think in the next couple of weeks, leading up to YCS Philadelphia and also to national season, we're going to have still a lot more movement. I think the number of Kashtiras in top cuts and in regional top cuts will definitely decrease rather than increase, and I think we're going to see more Runick variants actually moving up, and I think a lot of people will be so keen on trying out the live Twin Runick Spright version or the Fur Hire Runick version. So I'm really excited to see what is there going to be in the next couple of weeks. Thank you very much for watching. See you very soon for another episode of Lampi Loves Meta.